David loved the forest more than anything else. From the time he was a boy, he had spent hours exploring the trees, listening to the birds, and watching the sunlight fall softly on the moss-covered ground. He knew every path near his town, every hidden creek, and every tall oak that seemed to touch the sky. Being alone in the woods gave him peace, a kind of quiet that he could not find anywhere else. On a bright morning, David packed his backpack with care. He filled his water bottle, added a small first aid kit, a map, some sandwiches, and a few energy bars. He also packed a flashlight and a rope, just in case. Before leaving, he checked the sky. It was clear and the sun was rising slowly. Birds chirped and flew from branch to branch. David smiled and adjusted his cap. "It is going to be a good day for hiking," he said to himself. He started down the familiar trail, stepping over roots and rocks, breathing in the fresh air. The forest felt alive. The wind rustled the leaves and small animals scurried through the underbrush. Normally, David would whistle or hum as he walked, but today he noticed something strange. The usual sounds of the forest seemed distant, almost silent. Even the birds were quiet. A feeling settled in his chest, a quiet warning. David paused and looked around. The trees stretched high above him and sunlight fell in golden patches on the ground. He could see the small stream ahead, sparkling in the morning light. Normally, he loved this part of the trail, where the water flowed gently over smooth stones. But today something was different. He thought he heard a faint sound. At first, he could not tell what it was. It was soft, almost like a whisper, but there was fear in it, a struggle, and someone in pain. David's heart began to beat faster. He followed the sound carefully, stepping slowly so he would not make too much noise. The forest became thicker, with branches brushing against his arms and legs. He held his backpack tightly, feeling the first aid kit pressing against his side. The sound grew louder, more desperate. David's mind raced. Could someone be hurt? Should he turn back? He knew the answer immediately. He could not walk away. After a few more steps, David saw a small clearing through the trees. His stomach tightened. In the middle of the clearing, a woman was on the ground. Her hair was messy, her clothes torn, and her face wet with tears and dirt. A man was standing over her, tall and strong, his hand raised as if he were about to strike again. The woman's arms were weak, her body trembling. She looked up at the man, but her eyes were filled with fear. David froze for a moment. His mind raced, thinking of what to do. He did not have a weapon, but he had his courage and his wits. He noticed a thick branch lying nearby, broken from a tree. It was heavy enough to defend himself, but light enough to carry. David picked it up quietly, feeling the rough bark under his fingers. He took a deep breath, telling himself he had to act. "Hey, stop!" David shouted as loudly as he could. The man turned quickly, surprise crossing his face. The woman's eyes widened as she saw David, a stranger, standing between her and her attacker. David swung the branch near the man, not to hurt him, but to make him step back. The man hesitated, then shouted, stepping away. David could see anger in the man's eyes, but also a flicker of fear. "Run!" David yelled to the woman. She looked at him, uncertain, but her fear was stronger than hesitation. Slowly she got to her feet, leaning on David for support. He held the branch in one hand and her arm with the other, guiding her toward the edge of the clearing. The man followed, but David stood firm, keeping the branch between them. He felt his muscles tense, ready for any sudden movement. They moved cautiously, stepping over roots and rocks, keeping the trees between themselves and the man. The woman whispered her name. "Mary," she said, barely above a whisper. David nodded, encouraging her to keep moving. "You are safe now, Mary. Just a little more and we will be out of danger." The man eventually stopped chasing them. David could hear him muttering angrily, but he did not look back. The forest seemed quieter again, but this time it was safe. David and Mary slowed their pace, catching their breath. Her body shook as she tried to stand upright, and David offered her water. She drank slowly, looking around nervously. "You are brave," Mary said finally, her voice soft. I don't know what would have happened if you had not come." David shook his head. "I just did what I had to do. No one should be hurt like that." He looked at her closely. She had a small cut on her arm and a bruise forming on her shoulder. Nothing seemed life-threatening, but she needed help soon. David led her further along the trail toward a safer spot, where other hikers sometimes passed. He thought about calling for help, but knew that the phone signal was weak in this part of the forest. He kept talking to her, keeping her mind on him instead of fear. "We are almost at a place where we can get help." Can you walk a little faster? Mary nodded, gripping his hand tightly. The sunlight began to rise higher, warming the forest floor. Birds slowly returned to the trees, and the soft sound of wind in the leaves gave a small sense of normalcy. David felt a mixture of relief and worry. They were safe for now, but the memory of the man's angry face stayed in his mind. He promised himself he would make sure Mary got help, and that the authorities knew exactly what had happened. As they walked, Mary began to speak more, telling David about how she had wandered too far from her hiking group the day before. She had heard a noise behind her and turned to find the man. He had attacked her when she tried to escape. Her voice trembled, but she managed to continue. "I thought I would not survive," she admitted quietly. David felt a strong urge to protect her, to make sure nothing like this happened again. The forest around them seemed to stretch endlessly, with tall trees standing like silent guards. Every sound made David alert, but he kept Mary close, guiding her with gentle words. Soon they could see a small clearing ahead where the trail opened into a wider path. It was a place where other hikers often passed, and he hoped someone would appear soon. David felt the branch in his hand, ready in case the man returned. He reminded himself that courage was not about fighting alone, but about standing up for someone who could not fight for themselves. Mary's hand in his was small but strong in its grip, a silent thank you for his bravery. Finally, they reached a spot where sunlight poured through the trees, and David could see a small trail marker nearby. He paused, letting Mary rest for a moment. "We are almost there," he said softly. She nodded, taking deep breaths. "Thank you, David. I do not know what I would have done without you." He smiled, feeling the weight of relief. "We are not done yet. Let's make sure you are completely safe first." David knew this was only the beginning. They still had to reach help, and the memory of danger was close behind. But he also knew that sometimes courage was enough to protect someone, even when everything seemed dark. With one last look at the clearing, he stepped forward, guiding Mary toward the safety of the trail, determined to see her through to help and safety. David and Mary moved carefully along the trail, the forest still quiet around them. Every step was slow but steady. The early morning light made the leaves shimmer and birds began to sing again, but David could not shake the fear that the man might return. He held Mary's hand firmly, guiding her through the uneven ground. Her small steps matched his pace, but she still leaned slightly on him. "Are you hurt badly?" David asked, his voice calm but firm. Mary shook her head. "I have some bruises and a small cut on my arm. It hurts, but I can walk." Her voice trembled slightly, but there was relief in it. David nodded. "Good. We need to keep moving until we find someone." As they walked, David noticed that the trail split into two directions. One path led deeper into the woods, shaded and narrow. The other was wider and seemed to lead toward the edge of the forest. He paused, thinking carefully. "We should go toward the wider path. It will be easier to see people and get help." Mary nodded, trusting him completely. They turned onto the wider trail, the sunlight warming their faces. For a moment it seemed they were safe. The forest, once a place of fear, now felt calm. Birds flew from branch to branch, and a gentle wind rustled the leaves. David allowed himself a short breath of relief, but he stayed alert. He knew danger could appear at any moment. Suddenly they heard a sound behind them, a snapping branch, quick and sharp. David froze. Mary stiffened and looked back, her eyes wide with fear. The man from the clearing had returned. His face was angry and his eyes burned with rage. He began running toward them, and David's heart raced. "Stay behind me," David shouted. He tightened his grip on the branch. His mind raced as he thought of how to protect Mary. The man ran faster, shouting angrily. David knew he could not run very far without putting Mary in danger. He needed a plan. David glanced around quickly. He saw a cluster of thick trees to the side of the trail. If he could get between the man and Mary, the trees might slow the attacker. He took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Stop! Leave us alone!" he shouted, raising the branch. The man hesitated, confused by David's sudden bravery. David swung the branch toward the man, careful not to strike, but enough to show that he was ready to defend himself. The man stopped for a moment, then sneered. "You think you can stop me?" he shouted. But David did not back down. He planted his feet firmly on the ground, his stance wide and strong. Mary stayed behind him, trembling but safe. She watched as David held the man's gaze. There was something in David's eyes, a strength that made the man pause. David realized that fear alone could not protect them. He needed courage, quick thinking, and determination. The man stepped forward again, but David swung the branch toward him with a sharp motion. The man yelped and stepped back, anger flashing across his face. David did not let the man advance. He moved slowly, keeping the branch between them. "You will not touch her," he said firmly. Mary's hand tightened on David's arm. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling. David nodded but did not relax. He knew that danger was not over yet. The man might try again. David scanned the area for something else he could use to protect them. He noticed a large fallen tree lying across a small part of the trail. It could block the man if needed. "Mary, stay close to me. We will move carefully," David said. She nodded, stepping behind him as he led her toward the fallen tree. The man followed, but David kept the branch ready, moving slowly and steadily. When they reached the fallen tree, David quickly positioned himself in front of Mary. The tree made it difficult for the man to approach directly. He tried to move around it, but David swung the branch in a wide arc, forcing the man back. "This is your last warning." "Stay away," David shouted, his voice echoing through the trees. The man hesitated, breathing heavily. For a moment it seemed he would leave, but then he made a sudden move toward Mary. David reacted immediately, swinging the branch with a force that made the man stumble. He lost his balance and fell onto the ground with a loud thud. David did not strike again. He simply stood tall, watching the man carefully. Mary's eyes were wide. "David, you saved me," she said softly. David gave her a small nod. "We need to move now before he gets up." They carefully walked past the fallen tree, keeping a safe distance from the man. He remained on the ground for a moment, then slowly got up and disappeared into the shadows of the trees. David did not chase him. He knew the most important thing was to get Mary to safety. As they continued along the trail, David checked her cuts and bruises. "We need to clean this as soon as possible," he said. "It is small, but it can get infected." Mary nodded, grateful for his calm and careful attention. She drank some water and took a few small bites of the energy bar he offered. The simple actions made her feel safer and stronger. The trail gradually widened, and David could see the edge of the forest in the distance. Sunlight poured through the trees, and he knew that help was closer now. "Almost there," he said, smiling gently. "You are safe soon." Mary took a deep breath, feeling hope return for the first time in hours. As they walked, Mary told David more about her journey. She had been hiking alone, wanting to enjoy the quiet forest. She had not expected danger, and she had never imagined someone would attack her. David listened carefully, offering small reassurances. "You are strong, Mary. You survived and you are still here," he said. The forest began to open into a meadow, and David could see a small trail leading toward the town. They were close to other hikers and people who could help. David kept his eyes on the trees, still alert for any sign of the man. He knew that even though they had escaped, the memory of fear could still be present. Finally, they reached the point where the trail met a wider path. David could see footprints of other hikers and the small sound of voices in the distance. Relief washed over him. He held Mary's hand and stepped carefully onto the path. "We are safe now. People are near," he said. Mary smiled faintly, feeling hope again. David guided her toward a small group of hikers who were enjoying the morning sun. He explained quickly but clearly what had happened. The hikers immediately offered help, giving Mary water and first aid. David stayed close, making sure she was okay. The sense of danger slowly faded as they joined the safety of others. Mary looked at David with deep gratitude. "I cannot thank you enough." "You saved my life," she said, tears in her eyes. David shook his head. "You were brave too. You stayed with me and trusted me. That helped us both." She smiled, realizing that courage sometimes came from more than just one person. The hikers called the authorities, and soon police officers arrived to take statements and make sure everything was safe. David guided them back to the clearing where Mary had been attacked, giving a clear description of the man and the path he had taken. He knew that this would help prevent further danger in the forest. As the officers spoke with Mary and David, he felt a quiet sense of pride. He had done what was right, protecting someone in need. The forest, once a place of fear, now felt peaceful again. David looked around at the trees, the sunlight, and the gentle wind. He knew that courage could make a difference even when it seemed impossible. Mary smiled at him again. "I will never forget your bravery," she said softly. David nodded. "I just did what anyone should do. You deserve to be safe. The police promised to search the area and make sure the man would not harm anyone again. David stayed with Mary until she felt calm and safe. Then he watched as she walked with the officers toward help, feeling a quiet relief in his chest. The forest returned to its quiet rhythm. Birds sang, leaves rustled, and sunlight danced on the ground. David took a deep breath, feeling the peace he loved once again. He knew that danger could appear anywhere, but he also knew that bravery, calm thinking, and caring for others could change everything. David smiled softly and adjusted his backpack. The trail still called to him, and he continued his walk knowing that the forest held both challenges and beauty. Today he had faced one of those challenges and had made a difference. David watched as Mary walked carefully with the small group of hikers toward a safe spot near the edge of the forest. Her steps were slow, but each one showed determination. She had survived the attack, but David knew her ordeal was not over yet. She needed proper help, reassurance, and the presence of others who could ensure she was safe. David stayed close, walking beside her and the hikers. The sunlight filtered through the trees, warming their faces, but his mind remained alert. The forest could hide danger in its shadows, and even though the man had disappeared, David could not relax completely. He needed to make sure Mary reached safety without any further risk. One of the hikers, a woman named Lisa, noticed Mary's wounds. "You need to sit down and rest," Lisa said kindly, helping her onto a large rock near the trail. Mary obeyed, and David stayed beside her. He examined the small cut on her arm, cleaning it gently with water from his bottle. He used a clean cloth to press lightly on the bruise forming on her shoulder. Mary flinched slightly but did not complain. "You are very brave," David said softly. "Most people would have been too scared to move. You trusted me, and that helped us both." Mary smiled faintly. "I don't feel brave. I was so scared I just wanted to survive." David nodded. "That is exactly what bravery is. Even when scared, you find the strength to keep going." The hikers encouraged Mary to drink some water and eat a little food. David stayed alert, watching the trees and listening for any unusual sounds. For a moment, everything seemed peaceful. Birds chirped and a soft breeze rustled the leaves. But David knew the forest had hidden dangers, and he could not forget the man who had attacked her. Soon, one of the hikers suggested calling the authorities. David pulled out his phone, and for the first time in hours, he could get a signal. He dialed the local police and explained everything carefully. There was an attack on a woman in the forest. She is safe now, but the man ran into the woods. We need help immediately. The officer on the line reassured him that help was on the way. "Stay where you are. Do not leave the area until we arrive. Keep the woman calm and safe." David nodded, glancing at Mary. She was sitting quietly, her hands clasped in her lap, still shaken by the events. While they waited, David and Mary talked quietly. She told him more about how she had wandered off the trail the day before. "I wanted to explore," she admitted softly. "I did not think anyone would be in the forest, and I certainly did not think I would be attacked." David listened carefully, nodding. "The forest is beautiful, but it can also be dangerous. That is why we must stay aware and cautious." Mary shivered slightly and leaned toward him. "I am glad you were here," she said. "I cannot imagine what would have happened if you had not come." David smiled gently. "You are safe now, and that is what matters. You survived, and that is what counts." Minutes passed, and the sound of sirens echoed through the forest. The police were arriving. David felt a mixture of relief and tension. He knew that once the officers reached them, they would take control of the situation, but he still wanted to make sure Mary was okay. Two officers appeared, walking briskly along the trail. They greeted David and the hikers and immediately approached Mary. "Are you okay?" one officer asked gently. Mary nodded. I am okay now," she said, her voice quiet but steady. The officer smiled and began taking notes, asking her to describe what had happened. David guided the officers toward the clearing where the attack had occurred. He pointed out the path where the man had been, the fallen tree and the trail leading into the deeper woods. The officers listened carefully, asking questions and taking notes. David realized that every detail he remembered could help prevent future attacks. While the officers worked, Mary began to relax slightly. She was surrounded by people who cared about her safety. David stayed close, holding her hand briefly as reassurance. "You did well," he said softly. "You stayed with me, and that helped us both." Mary nodded, a small smile forming on her face. The officers then asked David to describe the man in detail. He explained the man's appearance, height, and build. He also described the anger in his eyes and how he had attacked Mary. The officers took everything seriously, promising to search the area thoroughly. David felt a sense of pride mixed with relief. He had acted quickly, stayed calm, and helped someone in danger. It was not about being strong or fearless. It was about doing what was right. And right now that had saved Mary's life. The forest, once a place of fear and uncertainty, now felt calm and safe again. David walked with Mary and the officers toward the main trail where more people were passing. The sunlight was warm and the sound of birds filled the air. It was a reminder that even in moments of danger, life could continue peacefully. Mary paused to rest on a large rock. "I cannot thank you enough, David," she said. "You were brave and you helped me when I had no hope." David shook his head. "I just did what anyone should do. You trusted me, and that was important too. You were brave in your own way." The officers arranged for Mary to be taken to a safe place nearby, where she could receive proper care and comfort. David stayed until she felt ready and reassured. He watched as she walked with the officers, surrounded by support and safety. When it was finally quiet again, David took a deep breath. The forest around him was peaceful, the sunlight falling on the leaves and the trail ahead. He thought about the events that had unfolded. Fear had been strong, but courage had been stronger. Calm thinking and careful action had made all the difference. David walked slowly back onto the trail, reflecting on the morning. He knew that dangers could appear even in the quietest places, but he also knew that courage, determination, and helping others could overcome fear. He felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Today he had done the right thing. He had saved a life. As he moved deeper into the forest, David noticed the birds singing more clearly, the leaves swaying gently and the sunlight sparkling through the trees. It was a reminder that life continued, even after moments of fear and danger. The forest was still his favorite place, but now it held a new meaning. It was not just beauty and peace. It was also a place where bravery and kindness could change lives. David smiled softly to himself, thinking of Mary. He hoped she would be safe, healed, and surrounded by people who cared. He continued walking, enjoying the forest and its quiet beauty, but he also carried the memory of the morning with him, a reminder of courage, action, and the power of standing up for someone in need. The sun climbed higher in the sky, and David walked along the trail, feeling the warmth on his face and the strength in his heart. The forest was alive, filled with life and possibilities, and for David, it was a place where even the smallest acts of courage could make a huge difference. David and Mary walked slowly with the police officers toward the clearing where the attack had occurred. The forest seemed quieter now, as if it had paused to watch the events unfold. David's heart was still racing from the morning's encounter, but he felt a sense of relief knowing Mary was surrounded by people who could protect her. The officers moved carefully, scanning the trees and the underbrush. One officer, named Mark, spoke to David. "Show me exactly where he was standing and where you intervened." David led him through the path, pointing out the fallen tree, the small clearing, and the areas where Mary had been attacked. Every detail mattered. The officer took notes and nodded. "We will search the forest thoroughly. We will not let him hurt anyone else." Mary stayed close to David, feeling safe in his presence and in the company of the officers. She had recovered slightly from the shock, but the memory of the attack lingered in her mind. She kept glancing at the trees, remembering the man's angry face. "Do you think he will come back?" she asked softly. David shook his head. "I do not think so. The police are here and they will find him. For now, focus on being safe." Mary nodded, taking a deep breath. The gentle sunlight filtered through the leaves, and for the first time that morning, she felt a small sense of calm. Officer Mark motioned to another officer to begin a search of the deeper forest. They moved in pairs, calling out and looking carefully through the underbrush. David watched as they disappeared into the trees, confident they would follow every trail. He felt a mixture of pride and relief. The forest, which had been a place of fear earlier, now felt secure again. Mary sat on a large rock nearby, sipping water and trying to steady her breathing. David knelt beside her, speaking quietly. "You are doing very well. You stayed strong even when things were frightening. That helped both of us." Mary smiled faintly, feeling warmth in his words. "I am grateful. I would not have managed without you." While Mary rested, David walked slowly through the clearing. examining the area for any signs of the man. He noticed footprints in the soft earth and marks on the trees where the man had pushed through the branches. These details would help the officers track him. David felt a small sense of satisfaction. He had acted quickly, and now his observations could prevent further danger. Minutes passed and the sound of voices returned from the forest. The search teams had found signs of the man moving deeper into the woods. Officer Mark approached David. "We have some leads. He tried to flee, but we will track him carefully. He cannot hide for long." David nodded. "Good. I want to make sure no one else is in danger." Mary watched the exchange, feeling reassured. "Do you think he will be caught soon?" she asked. David looked at the forest, thinking carefully. Yes, the officers are skilled and the tracks are clear. He cannot escape for long. While waiting, Officer Mark began taking statements from both David and Mary. They described everything in detail: the man's appearance, his behavior, and the events that had unfolded in the clearing. Every piece of information was important. David felt a sense of responsibility, but also pride. He had done what was right, and now the authorities could act on it. Mary explained how she had wandered off the trail and how she had been caught by the man. Her voice was calm but honest, and the officers listened carefully. David added details about his intervention, the branch he had used, and how he had guided her to safety. Officer Mark nodded approvingly. "You both were brave. Your quick thinking helped prevent serious harm." David felt a quiet satisfaction. The fear and tension from earlier were still present, but the forest no longer felt threatening. Birds chirped in the trees and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves. The sunlight highlighted the moss on the trees and the small flowers on the forest floor. It reminded David that the forest was still a place of beauty and peace, even after danger had appeared. Officer Mark called the other officers back and gave instructions to search the remaining trails. "We will cover every path and make sure he cannot harm anyone else," he said firmly. David felt relieved. The man who had attacked Mary would not escape easily, and the forest would be safer for everyone. Mary looked at David with gratitude. "I cannot thank you enough," she said softly. "You saved me today." David shook his head. "You were brave too. You stayed strong and you trusted me. That helped both of us." Mary smiled faintly, feeling a sense of hope returning after the fear of the morning. The officers continued to work, marking the paths and leaving signs to ensure no one accidentally entered dangerous areas. David walked alongside them, observing how carefully they moved. It gave him confidence to know that trained people were taking control of the situation. As the morning turned into late morning, more hikers and people from the nearby town began to arrive at the edge of the forest. News of the incident had spread quickly and everyone was concerned. David stayed near Mary, making sure she was not overwhelmed by the attention. He knew that after an attack, people could feel anxious even when they were safe. Officer Mark approached and spoke quietly to David. "We have followed the tracks further into the woods. We are confident we will find him soon. You did very well today. Your actions helped prevent something much worse." David nodded. "I just acted quickly. The important thing was to keep Mary safe." Mary looked at David, her eyes filled with gratitude. "I will never forget what you did for me," she said softly. David smiled. "The important thing is that you are safe now. That is what matters." The officers returned shortly after with news. They had located the man hiding in a small hollow under some trees. He had no way to escape without being seen. Officer Mark explained that he would be taken to the authorities and questioned about his actions. David felt a sense of relief. The danger that had haunted the forest that morning was finally being removed. Mary took a deep breath, feeling the tension in her body slowly ease. David stayed close, offering a comforting presence. "You are safe now," he said gently. "Everything is under control." Mary nodded, allowing herself to feel calm for the first time in hours. The forest, once a place of fear and uncertainty, now felt alive with peace again. Birds sang loudly, the sunlight warmed the ground, and the gentle rustling of leaves filled the air. David looked around, feeling a sense of pride and satisfaction. Courage and quick thinking had made all the difference today. David stayed with Mary until she was ready to leave with the officers. They walked slowly toward the edge of the forest where safety and help awaited. David knew that his actions had mattered, that bravery and care could change the outcome of dangerous situations. As Mary was taken to a safe place nearby for care and comfort, she looked back at David. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You gave me hope when I had none." David smiled softly. "You stayed brave, and that helped us both. Remember that courage is not always about strength. It is about acting when it matters most." The forest returned to its calm rhythm. David took a deep breath, enjoying the peace he loved. The trees, the birds, and the sunlight reminded him that even after fear and danger, life could continue peacefully. He knew that courage, determination, and helping others were stronger than fear. David walked slowly back along the trail, thinking about the events of the morning. He had faced danger, helped someone in need, and ensured that the forest would be safer. He felt proud, not for himself, but for doing what was right. The sunlight grew brighter as he moved along the trail. Birds flew between the branches and small animals scurried through the underbrush. The forest was alive with life and possibilities. David smiled, knowing that even in the quietest and most peaceful places, bravery could make a difference. The forest was quiet again, but the events of the morning still lingered in David's mind. He walked slowly along the trail, feeling the warmth of the sun on his face. Birds sang in the trees, and the soft rustle of leaves reminded him that life in the forest continued, calm and peaceful. Yet he could not forget the danger he and Mary had faced. Mary had been taken to a safe place nearby, where she would receive proper care and comfort. David knew she would be surrounded by people who would help her heal, both physically and emotionally. He felt relief knowing she was finally safe. But more than that, he felt a quiet pride. The morning had tested him in ways he had not expected, and he had acted with courage. The officers had assured David that the man who had attacked Mary was in custody and would face the authorities. They had followed the tracks, found him hiding in the forest, and arrested him without incident. Knowing that the threat was removed brought David a deep sense of satisfaction. The forest, once a place of fear, was now safe again. David paused at a small clearing, letting himself breathe deeply. He remembered the moment he had first seen Mary on the ground, the fear in her eyes and the anger in the man's face. He had been frightened too, but he had acted. That moment had defined the morning. Courage was not the absence of fear. It was acting despite it. As he walked, he thought about Mary's bravery as well. She had been terrified, but she had stayed with him, trusted him, and followed his guidance. Without her willingness to act and stay calm, the outcome might have been different. David realized that courage could appear in many forms, and sometimes it was a combination of efforts that changed the course of events. David returned to the edge of the forest, where other hikers and townspeople were gathering. News of the incident had spread quickly, and people were speaking in low voices about the bravery they had heard of. Some approached David to thank him, praising his courage and quick thinking. He shook his head politely. "I just did what anyone should do. The important thing is that she is safe now." A few of the townspeople had seen the officers taking notes and securing the area. They expressed relief that the forest was safe again. David explained calmly that even though danger could appear anywhere, careful action and courage could prevent harm. His words carried sincerity and experience, and the people listened respectfully. Meanwhile, Mary had been resting in a safe place with other volunteers and officers nearby. When she felt ready, she returned to the forest's edge to speak briefly with David. Her face showed signs of recovery, though faint bruises and scratches remained. "I feel safe now," she said quietly. "Thank you for everything." David smiled. "You were brave too. Remember that courage comes in many ways. Today both of us acted in ways that kept you safe." Mary nodded, a sense of calm settling over her. "I will never forget your help," she said softly. "It gave me hope when I had none." David shook his head again. "The important thing is that you survived. That is what matters most." The officers returned, reporting that the man had been questioned and would face the consequences of his actions. He would not be able to harm anyone else, and the forest trails would remain safe for hikers. David felt a deep sense of relief. The danger was gone, and justice would be served. David and Mary walked together slowly, moving away from the area where the attack had occurred. The sunlight shone brightly through the trees, and the forest felt alive with calm energy. Birds flew from branch to branch. Small animals scurried through the underbrush, and the scent of wildflowers filled the air. The forest was peaceful once more, a reminder that life continued even after moments of fear. As they walked, David spoke gently. The forest is beautiful, but it can also be dangerous. Today showed that courage, quick thinking, and care for others can make a difference. We both played a part in keeping each other safe. Mary smiled faintly. I see that now. I thought I was powerless, but your guidance helped me find strength. David nodded, and your trust helped me act with confidence. Courage works in many ways, and it is not just about one person. Together it becomes stronger. The trail led them to a small meadow where sunlight poured over the grass. Children were playing nearby, and families were enjoying the morning. The sound of laughter and happiness made Mary smile. She realized that safety and peace were not far away, and that life could continue after frightening moments. David watched her expression, feeling satisfaction. He knew that the most important part of the morning was not the confrontation with danger, but the outcome. Mary was alive, safe, and beginning to feel calm again. The forest had been a test of courage, and both had passed in their own ways. Mary paused in the meadow, looking around at the sunlight, the trees, and the people enjoying the day. It feels like everything is back to normal, she said softly. David smiled. The forest is always normal, but it depends on us to respect it and be careful. Today showed that courage and care can change everything, even in the scariest moments. As the day continued, David and Mary spoke briefly with the officers and volunteers, giving thanks for their help and support. They knew that the forest would remain a safe place because people were vigilant and aware. The man who had caused harm would face justice, and the trails would be watched more carefully. Finally, David and Mary parted ways, knowing they would stay in touch. Thank you again, Mary said softly. I will remember your bravery and guidance for the rest of my life. David smiled. You did not just rely on me. Your strength helped us both. That is something to remember too. David walked back along the trail alone, reflecting on the morning. He thought about courage, fear, and the importance of acting when it mattered most. The forest, once a place of fear that morning, was now a symbol of resilience, safety, and life. He knew that he had done something important, not for recognition, but because it was the right thing to do. The sun was high now, casting golden light across the forest floor. Birds sang cheerfully, leaves rustled gently, and small animals moved freely through the underbrush. The forest was alive with peace and beauty, a reminder that life always continued even after danger had appeared. David stopped for a moment, taking a deep breath. He felt a sense of quiet victory. The morning had been difficult and frightening, but courage, action, and care for others had made all the difference. He had faced fear and acted, ensuring that someone in need would survive and be safe. As he walked further along the trail, he smiled to himself. The forest would always be his place of peace, but it was also a place where bravery could be tested, and good could triumph over fear. David knew that the small actions of courage and kindness could change lives, and he had witnessed that firsthand. The forest around him was calm, the sun warm on his face and the sound of life vibrant in the air. David felt gratitude for the opportunity to act and relief that Mary was safe. He continued walking, enjoying the beauty of the forest and knowing that bravery could shine even in the darkest moments. By the time he reached the edge of the forest and the trail leading back to his town, David felt a sense of completion. The danger was gone, Mary was safe, and the forest returned to its peaceful rhythm. Life continued, and he had made a difference. That was the quiet victory that filled his heart with satisfaction. As he stepped out of the trees and onto the main path, David looked back one last time. The forest was beautiful, calm, and alive. He smiled softly, knowing that courage, careful thinking, and helping others had changed the course of the morning. The forest had tested him, but it had also shown him the strength that people could have when they chose to act with bravery. David continued toward town, carrying the memory of the morning with him. It was not just a story of fear or danger, but a story of courage, resilience, and hope. He knew that life could be unpredictable, but the choice to act, to help, and to protect others was always within reach. The forest remained a place of beauty, but it would also forever hold the memory of courage and quiet victory.